Hola, Poderistas, Liliana again. Now, I hope y'all are enjoying this power-packed summit. I am loving every minute of this, especially all of the amazing mujeres we're getting to meet today. This next conversation is sure to be one for the record books. We're talking about identity and the challenges in defining it, shaping it, and embracing it, especially when you come from a mixed background of culturas. Tune in as a few strong-minded Latinas commit to talking about this subject openly and honestly, sin pelos en la lengua.
What's up, everybody? I am Julissa Contreras. I am a storyteller, the creator of Ladies Who Bronche, the podcast. I'm also the writer of the YouTube hit Shit Spanish Girls Say. I am a Dominicana from the Bronx, and both parts of that are really important. Both parts of my identity are really important because the New York in me, the Bronx in me, really found a nuance to my Dominican identity that really has shaped how I define myself, whether it's the correct terms to call myself or the way I claim culture and my Blackness, right? And what parts of my Blackness that are tied to American Blackness that I get to claim because of community. And then the ways that my Dominican identity has woven through all of that as, you know, I've grown into the artist and the voice that I am. And so that's who I am.
Hi guys, I am Jeanine Mason. I am an actor and dancer. I am Cubana. I'm from Miami, Florida. I have the immense honor of playing Les Techo on Roswell, New Mexico on the CW. We're currently shooting our 4th season. And I guess my story is really connected to where I'm from, which is Miami, South Florida, and the Cuban community there that grew me. I'm first generation. My parents, both Cubans, my mom's side from way of Spain, and both moved here when they were, very young, and found a culture and community in Miami that has grown this artist, this woman that I am, and has made me be very inspired and active in trying to get my hermanas and the young artists who are coming up right alongside me and maybe like a couple years younger and helping them know they have a space in this industry and that there's a hell of a lot of support waiting for them. So thank you for helping me spread that word on this platform. And I will tell you, I'm in New York City. So if my neighbors come knocking, it's bound to happen. Just prepárate.
It gets loud. I'm in the Bronx right now, I know.
Okay, great.
That's dope. I'm like, what happened? Why are your neighbors gonna come knocking? Like, what happened? I'm like, what is that? My name is Kim Guerra. I am a queer mujer mariposa. And my family, I have a little bit of I'm the creator of Brown Badass Bonita. My background is, let me just tell you, my mom is Mexican. My dad is from El Salvador, but I didn't know I was half Salvadorian until I was 18 because I didn't know my dad. So it was like a culture like introduction, and it's been really beautiful to kind of delve in and get to know my Salvadorian side. And I think also like both of you was very heavily influenced by LA, like the San Fernando Valley 818 represent. And I have ADHD, I have all the things I want to say. San Fernando Valley, but also moving back and forth between LA and Mexico. And as a kid, but also now as an adult, my partner and I moved to Mexico earlier this year in January. So that's also been very, very interesting to reconnect with roots and to return to Mexico by choice. And that's also a privilege that we have and something that we're very, very intentional in how we take up space and also how we reconnect with community there. And yeah, I'm very honored and excited to be here to have this conversation and to be sharing space with y'all. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And, I think it's so interesting because a lot of what we do have in common, as you pointed out, Kim, is this idea that where we are from, the communities that we grew up in heavily influence the way we identify. And I think that aside from the fact that Latinidad already has like so many countries that are under the umbrella, there is then the geography of where all of these people actually live and, what that does and how we bring the pieces of our culture that are relevant to the country into these new spaces. And I think, the United States itself is, the US is the US. It's always been labeled this place of dreams. And so the way that when I think about some of the terms, right, of identifying, and I've always questioned, like, how did I really come to identify the way I thought I needed to identify when I was younger, for example, versus now. So when I, growing up in the Bronx, like I was labeled a Spanish girl. That's what I was called. I was one of the Spanish girls, and no understanding of that meaning Spain and Spanish being in like the non-PC-ness of it, but also never knowing what it meant to be Hispanic versus Latina. And like, and then it took until I got to college and I decided I wanted to minor in Latino studies for me to learn that there was a term Afro-Latino. And I was like, wait a minute, because the whole time I've held on to my blackness, I knew that there was blackness in Dominican Republic, but there was an American blackness that still felt tied and parallel, but I had no history books. I had no real concrete evidence as to what the diaspora was and how, in fact, the things that I was correlating, the hip hop drums with the reggaeton beats, right? The plátanos and like some of the yams and like a lot of just food and culture that made sense. And so when I finally was able to identify my blackness, I, for the first time, felt like I actually understood who I was and that I was not trying to force myself into one side of what was an in-between. So when I think about the terms I use, what's adequate, what's inadequate, like I think that everybody just needs to know from whence they came and what's true to who they are and what their experience is. And the truth is, I am Black and I have had a Black experience as well. And it's not just that my abuelita was Black or something like that. I'm just trying to hold on to it for the sake of terminology. I have a lived Black experience. I have a lived Dominican experience. And in both experiences, my Blackness centered how things went for me. And in most cases, it wasn't that great because of my Blackness, you know what I mean? So I take pride in my identity because I've had to fight to make space for my identity. How have you guys been able to sort of identify and find terminology for yourselves?
I relate with the college experience. And then I remember like clearly in middle school, like one of my best friends was Italian and the other one's Korean, and there was me. And I remember they're like, oh, you're not like those Mexicans. Like, what people say about Mexicans? And I was like, I grew up, my whole community growing up was like 99% like Latino, and most of us were Mexican. And I was like, what do they say about Mexicans? I didn't know people were saying things. Like, she listed all these stereotypes. And I remember in that moment, like feeling so much, I would say just like anger, shame. And I was just like shocked. Like, I'm like, people are saying these things. That was like my first encounter with like somebody else labeling me. And it was like not a good feeling. And then I went to college and I went to, again, like other people started labeling me, and I was like, I'm just trying to be me. Like, what the hell? And I took this class, like culture and ethnic identity development, where the professor teaching it was half Black, half white. And then he labeled like the stages of like how we identify, and then like the culture shock and then cultural immersion and the anger and the grief that you feel as you go through these things. And I remember like after college, I was like, I'm Latina and I'm Mexican and I'm proud. And then I got married to a white man. And that also just like was such a cultural shock that it made me like hold on to my identity even more, because I was like, oh my goodness, if I don't hold on to who I am, and I'm gonna lose myself. I'm gonna be kind of just like drowned in this like sea of white people. And I just remember that's where like Brown Badass Bonita was born, because I just remember feeling like, oh my gosh, like these people want me to like conform so much to like their ways, their thoughts. I'm holding on to me. And since then, I feel like my view has also expanded a lot. And one of the things that I want to like talk about, how a lot of brownness is still rooted in anti-blackness, and it doesn't leave space for Afro-Latinas. So that's one of the things I'm unpacking in my community, and where we're branding and all this. But I feel like our identity is a constant state of learning and unlearning and shifting perspectives as we're learning, because once we know better, we have to do better and know that we are responsible with our knowledge and with, how we take up space. That's where I'm at.
I you both, Jesus. Yeah, I think the drowning thing, Kim, like really feeling a sense of what is that in my life that has made me like cling on to, my culture. And for me, it was arriving in LA and like starting this acting journey. I realized once that happened that I grew up in a really happy bubble of like a bunch of Cubans and Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Jamaicans. Like we didn't have, like what Julissa was saying, I have so many Jamaican friends that are like my siblings I grew up dancing with in the studio, and Nicola and Julian. And when we didn't have that language yet of what it meant to be, within each other's cultures and circling each other's cultures, but what can we unify ourselves by finding the commonality there? And we were often like, just felt like we were from the Caribbean, and it was like, that was it. You know what I mean? And that was the thing that sort of felt right to us, because we all spoke Spanish to each other. We all participated in each other's cultures and celebrated each other's cultures. And now it's so fun to see my Afro-Latina and Afro-Latino friends just feeling like finally so much of what they've been experiencing is they can identify now, where it's like, I didn't get to be the two, but I grew up with so much of that. Coming to LA was like a little bit of a culture shock. And then I think, I've been doing this 12 years now. I was 19 when I started acting. And the first thing I got told when I landed in that city was that I was so lucky my last name was Mason, because it wouldn't out me as a Latina, and that I could pass. And I was like, what the fuck does pass mean? Oh, I don't know if I can curse, but I was like, what does passing mean? Like, I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, this is Latina, this is a Cubanita, So suddenly it was like this thing, this desire, this giant goal I had been working towards for so long was saying like, and quiet this part down and like keep this part under wraps a bit. And I am still wrestling with how polarizing that was as the foundation of my career. And I'm still trying to undo some of that. And I think because of that, there's a bit of a like curiosity in my being like wanting to be a part of these conversations and meet badass babes like you guys, but the other part of that naming of that like identity is that it's always one of the first things that comes out of my mouth when people ask me about me. It's like, I'm Cubana, I'm from Miami, I'm from this Cuban American culture, first generation. That's a word that like I love using too. That always feels right to my identity, and feels like it connects me to a lot of people outside of our diaspora too, who are first generation in their cultures. And that's always been like such a fun commonality to find. Yeah, that was a big part of the beginning of it. And now it feels yes, New York City. Right now it feels so good to be giving that gift to young artists coming in, where it's like, that's your superpower. And like, that's the part of you that is the gift you give to the world, that on behalf of like that bandera, you're out there doing good shit, work.
Yeah, I honestly, like, you both touched on so many things. My brain had like fireworks going on. One thing I definitely want to touch on is this idea of navigating, you know, our industries, right? Our respective industries with our identities. Like I am a storyteller. I started off as an actress. I was, you know, one of those kids in the Bronx, used to watch a lot of Disney Channel, and knew I wanted the dream of hitting it big, not because I wanted to be famous, but because I saw a tie to making it and not being in poverty anymore. And so I was like, ooh, a thing I can do is be the girl on Nickelodeon because I know how to do voices, and I leaned into my artistry, but really with this tie of I'm a first generation, and like because my mom didn't get to have a certain level of education, or because my dad didn't get to get employed into a certain kind of field of work despite his education, right? Like having all these things, I was like, yep, it's going to be me and it has to be me. And so even, you know, going to high school, I went to LaGuardia Performing Arts, which is, you know, the Fame school, that movie Fame. And that was a huge culture shock because there were so many white kids there. But not just that there were so many white kids, but there were people who were living in the same New York as me, but we were having such a different New York experience because of socioeconomic status. And so that sort of brings me back to this idea of community that's, you know, being in a city that's as diverse as New York, sometimes the things that you start to hold on to for your personal identity are no longer just tied to the stereotypes of what people think of your people, but how you survive. And so a lot of how I let my identity live had to evolve with how I felt I needed to survive. Before, a lot of it was, you know, never having natural hair. I mean, right now I'm in a protective style, but I have my natural curls, but it took me a long time. You could not get me out of that salon chair. Every Saturday I was there faithfully. Why? Because I refused to show my naps because I knew that that wouldn't make me as appealing. And it was this weird dynamic of feeling not Black enough to fit to present super Black without being questioned, and also feeling like being Latina meant I needed to look the closest I could to Shakira or J-Lo. You know what I mean? And knowing how impossible that would feel at sometimes. You know, I was a bit chubbier, and then there was even that lack of representation. And so like suddenly the way you identify starts to mold to where you're surviving. And so I'm just grateful that you guys highlighted that. But speaking of survival, I think that even when we think about a term like Latinx, right, there's a big controversy around the world around that word, because some people feel Latine is more appropriate and is better for the tongue and the vernacular of the Spanish language. Some people just think it's completely stupid and we don't need to create space for gender norms and blah, 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 blah. Clearly you see how I feel about that by the way that I just personified those who speak on that behalf. But I think what's interesting about the argument for those who are looking for gender neutrality but are arguing the X versus the E, I think again it's about the nuance of location and geography. And so personally, like I'm like, listen, you could put an X, you could put an E. For me, it's about what is the respect of how people personally want to identify, and why can't we get on board with that? Great. If South America and the Caribbean say Latine, the point is we know we're respecting, and it's about the cultural shift of gender norms. It's not so much about the word. And so I feel like people love to fixate and start arguments around, oh, do you say Latinx or not? Why are you starting arguments? Do you respect people's identity or not is the actual question. But I'm curious what you guys think about that.
How you like impersonated them is how I see them. Like, you know, like I've seen some of these comments of people getting so pressed, so like pissed off, like, what the fuck is Latinx? Like, da-da-da. No, it's like what you said. It's like it's about being more inclusive of like the different gender identities, and aware that Spanish is very masculine and very exclusive. And again, for me, it's like, I don't care if it's the X or the E. And as long as like we are trying to adopt that and like I feel like move forward or even evolve a little bit in, you know, in our language, because language matters, identity matters, and respecting one another matters more than like how you feel about a letter at the end, you know, about if it bugs you, like go to therapy, work through the issues that are coming up for you, that you're so bothered that somebody doesn't want to identify as Latino or Latina. Like, yeah, it's beyond that. And I feel like for me, it's a little bit like selfish if you get so pressed on a language that can feel oppressive, or a word that can feel oppressive to some in their identity.
That's exactly it, Kim, because what blows my mind is we have evolved. It's 2021. Like, our language is old as shit. Like, the fact that it is evolving makes all the sense in the world. If it wasn't evolving, if we weren't at a place where we were asking our language, hey, you got to catch up with us now. We're growing, we're doing better, we're being more inclusive. That would be something to be like all sorts of twisted about. But like, this makes all the sense in the world. And it's just time people realize the biggest issue we have is as human beings, we have problems with change. And that's it. And that's okay. Like, that's our nature. It's part of our survival instincts. It makes sense. But then we have to be able to look at it, separate ourselves, and just reframe this and go, this is healthy change, though. This is change on the benefit of so much of our, I mean, personally for some of our community, but truly for the benefit of the whole community, you know? And it's a natural thing, and more of it is going to come, and it just means we're moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. And Kim, you sort of put in our side chat, it's a colonizer language in the first place. And I think to add on to that, not only is the language coming from, colonization, it's also coming from a place of, or not even just the term, the idea that we are arguing over the term itself is coming from a trigger that is happening from the colonial mindset that we have already, which is to say, like, in many ways, when we're trying to navigate our identities in these spaces, sometimes we indoctrinate ourselves just a little because it's the only way, because the system itself really needs to be almost like abolished, rebuilt, whatever you want to say. But if it remains the same, then it doesn't leave much room for the honoring of the communities who have always been sort of at the bottom of the barrel, and actually, in fact, readjusting their experiences and their languages and their truth to uphold the fantasy of colonialism that everyone's afraid to let go of, because we don't see any other models that are uplifted that we can say, oh, that would work for us, so we can all live freely and identify freely, and that's okay. But because colonialism isn't capitalism, it's in the entertainment industries and how they're structured, like, it's almost impossible to escape. And so I think we need to allow ourselves to remove ourselves from the politics of the logistics of it and ask ourselves the questions around the humanity of it. Are we willing to work together as a community to make space for people to identify and thrive, right? What does pro-dignity, pro-prosperity for all look like? And if it means that we need extra support for mental health and people who are so old that they can't get with the times, then, like, I don't need to cancel you. I don't need to, like, remove you from the picture, but certainly I need to have resources to get you on board or not. Because if it means you're in therapy for the rest of your life because you can't get over the fact that somebody wants to change an O to an X, then you stay in therapy. But that person doesn't need to suffer because of how you don't want to use your tongue. So that's just, that's really where I'm at with that argument. And I feel very similarly to the way people are with the insistence of speaking Spanish. That is also a colonizer language. Like, to not speak Spanish is not at the root of the culture and the things that develop a lot of our Latino countries. Thinking about Dominican Republic specifically, and then I'm gonna shut up and let y'all sort of chime in on this sort of Spanish speaking aspect. But Dominican Republic is a Black island. That is a country. I have received death threats for saying that. Dominican Republic is a Black island that has lots of influences and lots of other things. To say that the most important thing on that island for someone to do is to side with the Spanish colonial rule and not to allow themselves to intertwine and even engage Haiti, right? And the actual intersections that exist there, because their Spanish is ridiculous and the tongue is very much associated with that. You are the best kind of Dominican if you speak Spanish, and not el dominicano roto, como de Washington, hi, hablando así. The more you can sound like you're from Spain and you're Dominican, it's like the most honorable thing ever, and it's toxic.
Yes, I'm just over here laughing because us Islanders, man, we just we love to roll it all together. And to me, it's like the music of home. I love it. I want it all to be like just one sentence. And but still, I remember growing up and having Spanish teachers from Spain teaching Spanish. It was always that in my schools, and really getting the sense that los colombianos had the most beautiful Spanish, or everyone had their preference, but it was always very clear and concise. And this is one of those issues that boils my blood. I don't know what it is. Maybe I need to get into therapy and figure this shit out, but I think it's because I witnessed it so much. Like I'm a 30-year-old woman. So like when I was going through, you know, school, I was seeing so much of this, of friends speaking, you know, Spanglish, or stuttering through trying to communicate with you know, an abuelo or an abuela, and getting these dismissive looks, these like, that's, you know, like, stop, like, either stop, it's not working, or you need to do better, or, you know what I mean? It's just dismissive, whatever it was. And it boiled my blood. I think it has stifled a lot of people from like getting to love and embrace their culture at those pivotal ages. And I'm always excited to talk to my, you know, Latinx friends about it, about being like, talk shitty, like speak Spanish awfully, do it, whatever you need to do. I mean, just do it. Like it's all a celebration and excitement. And even if it's just, you know, just the code switching, and that's like whatever feels comfortable to you, you know, because it doesn't need to be perfect. I've had anxiety about like, well, what if my kids don't then, if I'm not able to adequately teach them perfect Spanish? It's like, they get me, they're gonna be lucky, you know?
Right, yes.
I love that. There's so much shame in that. Like when parents like haven't taught their kids Spanish, and I grew up hearing that like so much, like, oh, you know, like for like they're like, oh, tienen nopal en la frente y no hablan español. And like there's so much shame in that. And we don't know, like one, like you said, it's a colonized language, and that doesn't define your identity. But two, like a lot of parents did that because of survival. Like they were afraid that their kids were going to face the same oppression that they did, or the same racism, or the same discrimination. And I feel like there's so much power in our culture and how we can still connect with one another, that we don't need the Spanish. I think it's beautiful, but and like you said, a lot of people have stopped or been stifled from como animándose, like to like step in and like try if that's something they want to learn. There's like a community called Spanish Sin Pena, that like people who want to learn Spanish kind of gather and practice together because they have so much shame about not knowing, or, you know, all of that. And I feel if you want to do it sin pena. And if you don't, no tampoco, there's no pena, there's no shame in there, because a lot of it is like, there's a reason why, and there shouldn't be a shame that you carry, or that people shame you into not feeling you're Latinx enough.
Right. Because even in like, when I've been to LA, like, you know, or when I first visited LA, for some reason I felt like nobody knew what a Dominican was. And a lot of it was like, whoa, I would start speaking Spanish. And they were like, oh, did you learn it in school? And I mean it, no. Ever since I popped out my mom's hoo-ha, I've been, you know, like that's just, it's what I speak, it's what I am, like, you know, and always having that. But it's interesting because even if there is no one way that we could all speak the same kind of Spanish, because like, you know, I'm not going to just start saying like, órale, güey, because it's like, oh, well, that's a certain type of Spanish. But maybe if I grew up in LA, like that would be natural. And so like, who would be to say, oh, you're Dominicana, you can't speak that type of Spanish. I love hearing other people say que lo que and dímelo, dámelo. Like, I'm like, please use the language, because it's coming from a culture, and especially from a culture that is shifting because of influence of American culture, which brings me to like my next sort of like brain exploration around like the tug of war of my Latinidad versus my American identity, right? Which to me, again, like I said earlier, is like, you know, a Black American, a Black Latina, right? What's connected in both experiences is that Black people are treated in a particular way across the globe. So I have to learn some of those skills and navigate them. But it's interesting, I am more comfortable in my Blackness as an American than I am as a Latina, because in the same ways that like, I'm first generation, and for so many reasons, you know, my family wanted to integrate into American culture for the survival, but there was always that like, but you better not forget the Dominicanness. And I think the speaking of the Spanish is one of the like strongest examples of that. But it's kind of like the tension and I feel like the psychosis of being a Latina in this country is the fear of like, am I letting go too much? Am I not letting go enough? Am I letting go too much? Am I not letting go enough? And when we have a year like we had this year with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, like just like all the names that we can list, right? And you then see your communities are fighting, because even within your community, well-meaning people are like, yeah, we're Latinos for Black people as a separate thing. And we're like, Latinos are Black people too, right? So like, just be conscious of the language. Like the intentions are there, but I feel like there is still a lack of consciousness that is due to people really trying to understand for themselves, how do I live in both sides of this moment, and honor both sides of the moment. But again, where we see colonialism, where we see things that are anti-Black or even anti-brown, anti-indigenous, right? Like, we need to be able to say, okay, there's something to unpack here that we don't need to hold on to anymore. And I feel like the navigation of that will help people in the straddle, right? Like, because then everybody sort of can accept and move through the nuances that exist. And nobody needs to look at us as one big monolith.
I love, yes. I used to say ni de aquí ni de allá, but it's like we're both de aquí y de allá. And because of that, like we are in that like stratum. And
oh, it's a strap. It is.
and giddy up. And because of that, it's like we have to realize it's not it's like if you're pro liberation, if you're pro this, like you have to be anti-Black, and you have to see the anti-Blackness in both cultures, and you have to see the sources of oppression in both, in both cultures, and see where, because at times it's easy, like, oh, I'm privileged when I'm here, but also I'm oppressed when I'm here. And it's like, use your privilege and use it wisely, but also don't, I feel like sometimes like I used to overly identify with oppression and suffering, so much so that it blinded me to my own privilege. And then once I was like, oh, you know what, I have privilege here and I can use it to bring these conversations to the table, to bring about change, to go out on the streets, to do this. And like, we have to realize that a lot of being part of both and navigating both is actually can be really powerful. The straddle, the bridge, whatever you want to call it, it's part of our power, and it's part of also our responsibility to be able to navigate both and have conversations and bring resources from one side to the other, and privilege from one side to the other, and seguir para adelante.
100% with you, Kim. And I think that also extends generationally. We, I think, have a lot of more resources, whether it's because we're caring to look for them, or because we've got great company, or because we know how to access a lot of platforms that are caring to have these kinds of conversations. So when I get overwhelmed about stuff, like I often do, like I'm sure most of us do, with trying to tackle these big things, I just try to remember that the smaller, the better. And I go right back to my family and to our dinner table and to my trips to Miami and to, sitting across from someone and being like, this is why there was a problem with Latinos for Black Lives. And I understand that the intention is there, and I love you, and I see that, and I see your big heart, and I know that that is, coming from a good place. But now let me give you why that might be a way in which other people are feeling shafted, other people are feeling hurt, So that I just hope everybody knows what a gift that is to give to your community, and what a massive ripple that can have, and how much we have available to us. And so go after those sources, even if it's, reaching out to us in our DMs. I know I love having a fun DM conversation with people, and just being like, hell yeah, good on you for doing that, that access someone else in your family might not have.
Right. And like having conversations with my abuela about Black Lives Matter, about homophobia. This year blessed us with that opportunity to have these conversations with our abuelas, our tias, our primos, that even from Mexico, like, what the hell's happening in the States? Like, we see the protests, we see the riots, like, all right, sit down, let's talk about this. A lot of the oppression that we're dealing with, it's like, let's abolish ICE, let's abolish police, let's talk about how we treated the indigenous communities, not only here in America, but also in Mexico, in our lands. And so it is a gift. And I like that you said that, Jeanine. It is a gift that we get to have these conversations. And I feel it's important that we realize that not only we get to have them, but we we have to have them.
Yeah. As people who are constantly navigating throughout the different communities, it's like imperative. And I love what you were saying, because it's like, you don't have to show up as like the superhero, right? Like, I don't need to be able to walk into the room and be AOC and have that, fire and eloquence. There's some people who are intimidated by the power of the voice of the activist, right? The person who comes in and it really feels like they're ready to shake shit up and like destroy. And so it doesn't always have to be that. I'm always a fan of saying, like, it's okay if you don't like protesting and you're really lazy about walking in the street, but make sure that you know how to compensate, because we need soldiers everywhere. Which is to say, just because a trend, or even like, I think social media is a great and powerful tool for activism and having these conversations. But I also recognize that people give that so much power that when they don't find space in the public eye to be effective, then they don't think that they can be effective at all. When in reality, having these conversations, and sometimes I say, if you are not even a speaker, then make sure you are leading by example. Because if you are someone who, let's say you're in a boardroom or you're in a specific space, to Kim's point, you can be the one to say, hey, there's something missing here, right? Like, when there are spaces where I only see cis het folks, I'm like, we don't have any queer voices here. Like, just FYI, just in case you didn't know. Or sometimes even down to like, I'm Black, but there are women who represent a different type of melanin that I don't see in this room, who have a different experience than my Blackness, and you're trying to get to the root of the conversation, but you're picking a safety person on the spectrum that you're looking at, right? And so sometimes that means self-sacrificing an opportunity that might look like it's great, and you might want it, but you have to see the value of the moment. Is it more important for me to personally have this opportunity, or do I care more about the larger representation, so I hand it off? I think, we've had many different pop culture things that have happened this year where the lack of Black representation has become the center of a conversation, and people get defensive and think, oh, well, now you're trying to take away the little bit that we have, when the reality is like, no, is that we have to stop letting them give us so little at a time. It's not that we don't want to have it all. It's not that we don't mind having things that are like Latinx cast that are white Latinx, because there are parts of the world and realities where people are only living amongst either their indigenous parties or their white parties. But like, then where are we giving the space for the Afro Latinidad? And when can we have it on a very normal, matter-of-fact basis, and not it being about the fact that we're Black? And so that's why we're gonna do it. It's a big Black moment. And it's just like, that song and dance is very dangerous. And I think that even recognizing as a consumer, oh, hey, like, I might love that film or that work or that play, but the more I feed into the cycle that allows for them to oppress my people within that, then I'm participating. So maybe my advocacy is not watching the thing or not reposting, blah, blah. You know what I mean? That we actually have, as consumers, have so much power. I mean, I don't know the exact statistic off the top of my head, but of all the money that is managed in this world, right? Like, very little of it is given in the hands of women or minoritized groups, right? But we contribute like the highest amount to that money that's being managed. And so if we were able to look at facts with each other, not just our feelings, but facts of what is happening, facts of how colonialism has affected our mindset, facts of how industries have been set up to not work with people, facts of how money doesn't move and poverty shakes in specific places, then we can look at the things that can actually counteract those facts. But we have to be ready for the self-sacrifice that comes with that, and know that it's only a moment until we sort of come back afloat. We kind of have to go underwater, and when you have that moment where it's like, oh, am I coming back up? Am I coming? But you have to understand that there's support in that in between space, but you're always going to come back up. But what matters most? And if you don't care about that, and if you don't care about humanity, then you have to own that. And you can't get mad when people label you what that actually means. You have to own your title. I'd rather a jerk who knows they're a jerk than somebody who's trying to sell me candy and act like they're not jerking me because they're charging me 10 times as much for what that candy is. Anyway, sorry, I get passionate.
Don't apologize for speaking the truth. Don't apologize.
Yeah,
we're gonna come up again. It's like, you're not gonna come up by yourself. We're gonna come up if we do that.
Yes. Amen. And and I wonder, I think a good sort of way to like, because I think with all the like truth that we spread, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel and something that can be shared. I wonder for you guys, what are some ways that you cope with the navigation of this world, the navigation of identity? What are tips? How do you self-care? You know what I mean? Like, how do you hold space? How do you then hold space for yourself? How do you ask for space to be held? Like, what are some of the practices and mindsets and values you hold as you navigate your identity in this world?
Oof. Well, I'll tell you, when, America and Eva, and Gina Rodriguez, when they put together this group of like actresses in Hollywood getting together for the first time in a room, that really changed my life. It did, because I was very accustomed to being like, number 3 on the call sheet behind Francia Raisa, but never actually getting to hang with her. And now she's one of my closest friends, I think doing exactly that, Julissa, like saying, hey, you know what if we cast Liz's family and then we get more, actors of color on this show, more Latinos on this show, hey, we don't have enough queer writers in the room, given how many queer storylines we have, like conversations like that. I'm so lucky on my gig. Like, goddamn, we're all so happy to have those kinds of conversations. And I know that's not the case on every job. And I know I'm going to face more resistance at some points. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. I'm still going to do it. And let me tell you, I'm sure you guys feel this too, but there's a people pleaser in me, and she runs, Cuban Catholic deep. Okay. It's rough. And this has been the best thing I could have given my profession could have given me. Sometimes I think what we end up doing, we're attracted to it not only because we enjoy it, but also because we have shit to learn, and only that will teach us. And this has really taught me, and I'm so grateful to be coming up in this time when we're having these kinds of conversations, because it has taught me to be brave in those work environments where I might have been too afraid, And the way that I get that support, that I get that backup, that I like refuel and recenter, is by talking to these women. And I cannot tell you what a difference it makes. Yes, send the text. Yes, have the group chat, whatever it is. But call. I'm telling you, 5 minutes on the phone with a girlfriend who gets it on your way to work. I swear to you, you're an inch taller. I swear to you. And this week alone, I had conversations with 2 actress friends about work stuff, asking, my input, like, what I suggested. And we were volleying back and forth and deciding what was best for each other, Community is huge. And I know it seems like something you always hear, but I don't think people take it up as strong as they should. Like, being precious about your community and using your community to be refueled. And do it with calls, do it with a drink or a FaceTime or what, you know what I mean? Like that adds a lot of value. And then I'll tell you this last thing, years ago, I saw this actress was taking over a theater account, and her show was debuting on Broadway. And she shared this thing that she says to herself every night before she goes on stage. She says, "My witches are with me." And the way that isn't that good? The way that she means it for herself is that in those moments where she might feel overwhelmed, where she might feel nervous, she reminds herself that she's connected to every woman who has been at that moment where they are about to step onto a stage. And in that moment, she gets power from all of them, in present, past, future. That is some real stuff to connect to. And I hope in these moments where you're feeling like, am I being too much? Blah, I can't even say it. It's so gross. Remember, your witches are with you. Your brujas are with you. We're all there with you,
I love that. Julissa, are you going to say something?
Oh, no, I was like, yes, Ashe. I didn't know I was on mute, but I was like, the witches are, the ancestors, all of them.
Todas, all of them. I agree. When my friends gather, that's like sacred time. We call it the queendom, like queendom come, and we're doing queen shit, and we honor and see the queen in each one of us. And that, that I feel like it brings me back to life. It's like to touch base with the women in my life, but also like being a I'm also a therapist. That's why I'm always sending people to therapy, sending myself to therapy. Be in a constant state of healing, of like being willing to identify your wounds, to do that shadow work, to let the light in, to be in constant metamorphosis, y'all. Like, because we have the power to give us ourselves wings, but also our communities. Like, I want to see my community with wings. I want to see, and like, you know, I want to fucking tackle everything that's keeping us from flying, from doing the things that we want to do. Like, I want to tackle that so that, you know, the next generation has more than we do, knows liberation, tastes liberation, and not just is constantly fighting for it or talking about it. I want them to know it, be it. And I believe it's possible, but every decision that we make takes us either closer or farther away from a collective liberation.
Absolutely. And you know, I think like for me, because I'm a little pit bull. I don't know if it's the Bronx in me, right? But sometimes for me, like part of what helps me navigate this is validating my anger, validating my frustration, right? And letting myself actually, and I think that the space that you guys are describing is, those are great ways to make space to express those things. If you, whether it's through your artistry, also like things that are individual. And honestly, there's a lot a whole meditation moment can do. And meditation doesn't have to look like sitting like this and having like sage and all. Like you literally, meditation can be when I'm cleaning my house and if I'm blasting Juan Luis Guerra and I'm singing and I'm like, you know, like doing that stuff because I have to let that go. Or sometimes, honestly, it's like celebrating your authenticity and being unapologetic in that authenticity is like the healthiest way, because what we often don't realize is that we're wearing a lot of masks and jackets and wait, right? To navigate and like ready to fight these preconceived notions that come our way. But sometimes I don't want to have to fight. And sometimes I want you to deal with me. And you're the one who has to put on a jacket or whatever. And if we got to fight, then guess what? I'm ready to fight for what's right for me, right? And so I think it's important for people to know that it is okay to not be happy and kumbaya about your liberation, right? But always validate and always take that moment for yourself to reconnect and center, right? Because it's a long game, not a short game. And for a lot of people, welcome to the party, right? A lot of people are waking up right now. Welcome to the party. A lot of us have had to live our lives learning how to be in a constant state of this, right? And so I do think it's important to celebrate. I think rooms like this, conversations like this are super important. It's been so wonderful chatting with you ladies today. You know, I wish that we can go on forever and ever and ever. There's so many layers that we didn't even begin to unpack here. But, you know, I just want to encourage anyone who's watching to know that who you are is meant to be defined by you, right? And if who you are is some sort of issue, then there's a way to navigate that with patience and with grace, right? But it's all about intention. So as long as your intention is right and you're willing to honor that intention, then whatever changes have to happen as a result to get that will be worth it, because you will get what is right and good for your highest self at the end. So just hold on. You got this.
You got it. Amen. Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, and with that, yeah, just thank you, ladies. This has been so great. I wish it was in person. You know? And I can't wait to hopefully meet you all someday.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I adore both of you, and thank you for vibrancy, and you're just brilliant, and I'm grateful you exist.
Gracias, Julissa. Your fire, your truth, your wisdom. I'm like, I receive it, I celebrate it, and I'm angry right along with you, because it's like, let's give permission for people and women especially to get angry, because it's needed. Our anger brings a lot of change about.
Yes.
Pero muchas gracias for being here, for holding space. And if you're ever in Mexico, please.
Una vez.
I'm like, well, hold on, let me get my bags.
Come on over.
I'll meet you at LaGuardia, Julissa. Let's go.
Right, let's go. I'll meet you
with some mezcal.
Boom. La Borinqueña is an Afro-Puerto Rican superhero. She is an environmental champion fighting for environmental justice. Her powers are drawn from the feminist energy that historically is a part of Puerto Rico. The Taínos, the indigenous people of Puerto Rico, they believed in a supreme being, a mother goddess, Atabex. And she introduces La Borinqueña to her twin sons, Yucahu and Huracán. Yucahu, the spirit of the seas and the land. Huracán, the spirit of the elements and hurricanes. I mean, the actual word hurricane literally comes from Puerto Rico because the Taínos said huracán. And these elements are part of Puerto Rico's original mythology. The original name of the island was Borinquen, land of the noble, valiant creator. And she's La Borinqueña. She's the living spirit, the living embodiment of this powerful energy and history that has always been a part of Puerto Rico. But believe it or not, has been hidden. Most comic books are based on either Greek, Roman mythologies, Norse mythologies. We love superheroes and they've been around for over a century, but these characters by and large are white male narratives. They don't look like us. They don't sound like us. Caramba, ni comen como nosotros. When's the last time you heard of a superhero eating sancocho? I wanted to create a superhero that really worked on the true history because it was embroiled in some sort of wicked mystery, and I wanted to unveil all of that. One of the most important things to do when you're trying to suppress a people, oftentimes, is you destroy their history. When empires take over nations, one of the first places they go to are the libraries. They destroy the archives. They destroy the art. Do we know what our history is in this nation, what our contributions have been to this nation? Because when we understand that, then we know and respect and expect others to acknowledge our place in our nation. We have to learn who we are before we know where we're going. What we try to do with La Borinqueña is not only reintroduce people to that lost history, but teach people to embrace it, because by embracing it, you find that superpower that was always there all along. And one of the most important superpowers that the character has is to show the world what our family is, because she's incredibly connected to her mother and father, but also to her abuela and abuelo in Puerto Rico, because that is at the core what our superpower is beyond the pages of a comic book. She's a hero that's connected to a real place, a real people, a real history.
Latinos are like millions of diverse threads connected through our shared heritage. AARP recognizes that we make the fabric of America stronger through our contributions, talent, and unique experiences. From one loom, we weave a collective future. And with AARP, we ensure that future is filled with health, wealth, and happiness. Celebrate your Latinidad. Connect with AARP.
The first day of the Latinas Make a Difference Summit is almost a wrap, so don't miss the chance to wind things down with a celebratory Girls' Night In. Stick around for a sec once that wraps and catch a quickie preview of all the good stuff that we have in store for you mañana.